Welcome back to yet another tutorial. Now last video I showed you how to set up the scoring system for the enemy and how to detect collisions with the enemy and how to set a minimum score point before you have to lose or restart the game or whatever you want. So now we're going to show you how to make explosions inside your game. This is a great way to tell the user that you're not really supposed to be doing that. For example, when the player hits the bomb, we're going to add an explosion to tell the player that you should really not do that because it's bad for you and your health is going to decrease. So let's just add a plane. We can rotate it a bit, move it up on the z-axis and move it backwards so it's not clipping through the car. Actually rotate a bit more. There we go, that seems fine. And once we have our plane in place, we need to add a texture to it. So the texture is going to be a image texture, which is going to be the tile sheet. So let's go ahead and grab an image texture right here, and now we're going to have to plug this into the base, but since it's an explosion that we're going to make, we're also going to plug it into the emission. And while we're here, we might as well just turn it up a bit, maybe to 0.5. And since it's a tile sheet, we need to plug the alpha into the alpha, because if not, it's not going to have alpha channel. So now we can open up the image finally, and let's try and find it. Here. Select your tile sheet. You can find it on the internet or you can make it yourself. I might make another video on that, but for now I'll link this tile sheet in the description if you want to go check it out. Now we have a slight problem because, as you can see, this is not a very good explosion. This looks very distorted, very weird. If you can actually see it like that. Yeah, it doesn't look very nice. So let's go to the UV editing tab. And now we can actually just select all these vertices right here and scale them down. The UVs, I mean, the UVs, not the vertices. And let's get them nice and straight into the corner. We can move them in with GX and GY to move them down. And what you want is a square, basically, a square for your UVs. Because what we're going to do is we're going to define how many the images there are. And the program is basically just going to play the animation by moving the UVs along like this. So make sure you don't have any overlapping, because if not, you're going to have like two different images in the same animation in the same time. Wait, just make sure there's no overlap. I know what I mean. The only trouble is that since we have it on the top left corner, we actually already start with an image, so as soon as we launch the game, this image will be on our plane, and we don't really want that. So what we can do is we can just move it along to the end, and then GY to move it down to the bottom, because here is the end of the explosion, and that works well because there is, well, nothing. It's the last image when there's nothing there. So let's just center it to the corner, and there we go. Now we will start with nothing, and we'll start when we hit something, it's going to play the animation and start from the first frame and then work its way around. So it's perfect. Now that we have that, we have still got a small problem because we have a black screen and we want it to be transparent. So let's go to the object data, the texture tab, and set the blending mode in the settings, the blending mode to alpha hashed. And now we have transparency, which is great. Now what we can do is define the actual tile sheet. So to do that, let's close this settings, all the other stuff, and open up the Armory tile sheet. Now we need to define this plane to be a tile sheet. So let's define it, create it, and call it explosion. Now this is where you need to count how many images you have and on the horizontal and vertical axes. So here we have a 4x8 image tile sheet. So what we do is we type in 8 and 4. 8 on the vertical axis and 4 on the horizontal axis. The frame rate is going to need to be something pretty high because it's an explosion, so it happens very fast. So I'm going to set it to 30. And now we need to define the action. Now, to define the action, it is not like defining the tile sheet. Basically, in a tile sheet you can have multiple actions. For example, if in this case we only have one, the explosion, but if you had a character that you downloaded off the internet or whatever, you might see that there are multiple different tile sheet animations on the same image. For example, you have the idle, the run, the walk, the jump, all on the same image. And that's where the actions come into use. We can have multiple actions defined by on the same image, so that's great. So in our case we have 32 explosion images, separate ones, that we're going to have to play to make the animation, and we don't want to loop them because that would be dumb. We'll just have a repeated animation constantly. So now what we can do is rename that, because if you don't then it's not going to allow you to use it. And now we need to make another one. And this one is going to be the idle animation, and remove the loop as well. And this one, what it does is basically it just well, it's idle, it's nothing basically. This is what is it's like if you see my how to play an animation in Armory 3D. It's the same principle. You have to have an animation in place to be able to trigger another one, and to be able to trigger it you need at least two. So this one's the empty one that's going to be empty, and then as soon as you call it, this one's going to start playing, and then it will revert back to the idle, which is a nothing. So that's how it works. Now we need to actually set it up in the object data tab, because we have defined the tile sheet and now we just need to start playing it. So if we go to the object data tab and we can go down here to the Armory props, we can set the tile sheet to be the explosion, which is the one that we made, and the action is going to be idle, like I've said. And then once we call it, it's going to be reverted to boom, and then directly back to action. But that's the default one that's going to play as soon as you start. If you set this to action, to boom I mean, then it's going to start playing that animation as soon as you launch the game, which is not what we want. We want it only to play once we collide with the enemy. So, once I've done explaining that, we can go to add the action to the enemy. So to do that, let's go to the boom tab. And down here, this is the trait that we copied from the gas in the last video. We just changed the event. So now we can add a couple of nodes. So the first node we want is the play animation, play tile sheet. Not the play animation. Play tile sheet. That one. And let's plug it into the remove object tab, or we could even plug it into here. You know, why not? And the object in question is obviously going to be the plane. That is the tile sheet object, the plane. And the name of the tile sheet is boom. This is the name of the action, actually, not the name of the tile sheet. Boom is the object that we want. Now, once we play it, you will see that there are one last thing that we need to do. But apart from that, it's looking pretty good. And there we go. The problem being that the animation does play quite fast. And so we can just decrease that and it'll be fine. Anakin, the big problem is, as you can see, if I collide with another bomb, if another bomb gets spawned, here we go, it plays in the middle of the bloody screen. I mean, we don't want that. You don't want a guy to blow up some dynamite and it blows up a different city or whatever your game is. The point being, we need to set the plane to be at the location of the bomb. So to do that, let's go ahead and grab two different nodes. In the transform, let's get the get object transform. And that, like it says, is going to get the transform of the object. The transform that we want is the bomb. So we're going to plug the self into the object. If you didn't remember, then the self node is basically, it gets the name of the object of which the script is applied to, the trait is applied to. In this case, the trait, this entire trait is applied to a bomb, so it's going to get the bomb's name. And since we're using a spawner, it's got multiple instances of said bomb. So every single bomb is going to have the same logic, so we don't need to individually call these. And now we need to set the plane to be at the location of whatever that location is, what it's got. So we go to transform again and set object transform. We can plug that between the contact and the play animation, and plug the transform into the transform, and obviously define that the plane is the object that we want to move to that location. Now if we play this again, you should see that we should have a pretty good we had a pretty good explosion. So we have here, it's not loading, here we go. Here it plays at the location of the bomb, which is, you know, what you wanted. So there we have another bomb, 2 bombs, yay. As you can see, it's a bit high, so we can move it down and change the actual frame rate even more, so we can set it to 16 maybe. And we can actually just move the bomb down slightly. Textures aren't loaded. There we go. Where's the bomb? There we go. And move it down slightly, move it forward slightly. There are a few adjustments to make, and in fact I'm planning on making an entire new video dedicated to that. Exactly. For example, changing the different the animations. We want to make the car turn when we move it, stuff like that. And we're gonna also do tutorials on like sound effects, on like different events and screens and missions and stuff like that. If you have an idea, please put it down in the comment section. I read them all. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.